10 minutes behind schedule.
We're always on time, schedule. Brian.
Yeah, dude, always. We don't start until it's on time. Welcome back, Mighty Vandals, to Tubbs the Club, your University of Idaho affiliate on the Big Sky Podcast Network. I'm your host, Brian Marceau, joined today by producer Redacted, always in the shadows, hanging out in Moscow. Marten, how's it going?
Going good. It's another week, and it's a short week, but I am excited to be back on and hear you guys talk about the big game this Friday.
And then this week's co-host, you guys can see Dallas is at Nickelback again. So Colby Peterson, you guys know him from Walk On Apparel, a.k.a. shirts like these. You also might know him from Weber State Weekly. He's been writing for FCS Nation Radio. Colby Peterson, how's it going?
Good, man. Glad to come back and chat Idaho with you guys, man. I've told you guys before, Idaho has got, a special place in my heart, so good to chat.
Well, and I mean, we would have talked. We would have had you on for Weber Portland State a couple weeks ago, but we didn't want to spoil the Portland State preview for our guys last week.
All good, totally understandable.
But this is a big week for Idaho, big week for NAU as well. By the way, spoiler: we're recording Tuesday this week because Idaho's game against Northern Arizona is Saturday night, aka Halloween, on I believe ESPN2. Marten can fact check me on that. Because of that, we're rolling a little bit early. And before we get to Around the Bar, got to remind you guys, if you are looking for a great all-inclusive week-long vacation, do not look past your backyard. Hughes River Expeditions has been Vandal-owned and operated since 1976 and are ready to take you on the vacation of a lifetime. Enjoy a multi-day trip down the Middle Fork of the Salmon, the main Salmon River of No Return, the Salmon River Canyon, or the Selway, and check out special trips like the one to see the Perseid Meteor Shower. Camp on pristine bitches. That was an actual accent, pristine bitches. Run amazing whitewater, hike scenic trails, spot wildlife, so beautiful natural hot springs, and fish some of the most remote stretches of river in the country. You just bring your clothes, let HRE handle the rest. Give a call now, 406-540-4450, or check them out at hughesriver.com. All right, Colby, it's Northern Arizona, which it's in Flagstaff, which, depending on who you are, Flagstaff can always be a weird place to play. The elevation's high, but, I mean, Idaho's, many teams do fine with the elevation. It's more Northern Arizona's actually looking, they're a weird team to me to talk about, Colby. They're top 20-ish, but no real good wins on the NAU schedule. Got their asses kicked by Montana State and UC Davis, who are both top 10, but I felt that definitively let everyone know. Northern Arizona, not a top 10 level team, but they're a team. Second-year coach Brian Wright is looking for a second straight playoff appearance. So I guess, to get things started talking about who the Lumberjacks are and if Idaho can, in fact, off the Jacks this week. We talk about Northern Arizona. You tell me where your mind goes to first.
Well, I wanted to talk about, like you said, the elevation, because for us, we always seem to have a weird go of it. And so, like you said, it really just kind of depends. Some teams handle it well. We never seem to for some reason. It's just weird to win up there. So it's high, like you said, it's 7,000 feet. It's like 7,500 feet up there. So ball flies kind of weird sometimes. So we'll just kind of see. When's the last time Idaho went up there and played? Probably at least 3 years.
Off the top of my head, I have absolutely no idea.
The last time Idaho played NAU, it was 2022.
In Flagstaff.
Yeah, in Flagstaff, yeah. 2022, I was at that game.
Yeah, so 3 years ago, it's probably a lot of different faces the way that the portal is today from that 2022 team. So this will probably be a new experience for the guys, and so hopefully they can adjust to it quickly. But when I think about NAU, NAU is, I mean, first name that comes to my mind is Ty Pennington, right? Like Ty Pennington was, I mean, I think maybe not a surprise, but he was definitely a standout for them last year. They were a playoff team last year. They got in, they were able to squeak in and get a first round game. Didn't go so well for them, but at least they got in, and that's a big deal for them. And Pennington was a big part of that, right? Plus, they had a great secondary last year. Secondary this year, not as stout as their one last year, but it's at least league average.
Yeah, looking at NAU, they've kind of been a before and after the out of conference of the first half season, second half of the season. I feel that the gauge on NAU is hard to read. Look, the team sits at 5-3 overall. They're 2-2 in Big Sky play. Their Big Sky, already talked about the losses in Big Sky play. The wins for NAU come over Portland State 31-17 in their first Big Sky game. And then last week, they beat Idaho State in Pocatello on Idaho State's homecoming, 31-18. They sit at number 19, and usually, hey, you're a Big Sky team at number 19. Look, I mean, the Big Sky is one of the better conferences. So, like, duh. Like, if you're top out of the Big Sky, there's a good chance you're being ranked. But I call them definitively okay. Because I feel that, especially with, Ty Pennington was preseason All Big Sky quarterback. And look, this is not to say the dude has been bad. He's a quarterback a lot of teams would like to play. But his first half of the season, second half of the season production has been pretty different. The guy's got 11 touchdowns on the season, but in 4 Big Sky play, just 3 total touchdowns. And you go to the tape with NAU and just look at their Big Sky production, haven't scored more than 31, which was a surprise if you look at the out-of-conference slate where they hung 38 on Utah Tech, hung 52 on Southern Utah, 31 on Incarnate Word. Offense has been not awful by any means, but very, very league average, 24.5 in Big Sky play. And you go to the tape, and in spite of having Pennington, who is a good passer, he's quite content to pick teams apart. Brian Wright likes to call a game where NAU is not relying on a ton of deep shots to make things happen. A lot of short to intermediate passes, a lot of quick passes to the flats to give his receivers space to work. But the Lumberjacks, they run the ball. I mean, it's not precisely 50-50, but they run the ball a lot more than you guessed. Seth Cromwell leads the way for the Lumberjacks on the ground. He's rushed for 384 yards on the season, only averaging 3.9 yards a carry, then 7 touchdowns. He's also a running threat, not really a home run threat, but he can absolutely extend plays a little bit and pick up a first down. Other name to pay attention to is Karan Gassett. He's the number 2 running back in the backfield for NAU. He's got 6 touchdowns as well on 67 attempts. So like phase 1, I guess early in the season, I expected NAU was going to be kind of a high-flying offense, give up a ton of points, because that is what they look like in the offseason. But, heading into Big Sky play, it's mellowed out a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, a good point. Like, looking at these scores, once they hit Big Sky play, 31 against Portland State. I mean, you've talked about how top 5 Portland State has had struggles this season. They're winless, so 31 points there. And then 31 points last week, and that's been kind of their high water mark. So maybe not as high flying as people thought. Definitely compared to other teams where we would expect it. Like, we were promised the go-go offense in Sacramento, right? There have been a couple of games where it's looked like that, but this has been sort of, like you said, a lot more balanced than I think a lot of people in preseason anticipated, because they gave Pennington that preseason All Big Sky, probably anticipating that he was going to sling the ball a lot and probably be if not the best, but maybe top 2 or 3 quarterback in the league, just kind of looking around because there were a lot of new faces, things were just going to be a little bit different in the Sky this year. So not quite what maybe was advertised in the preseason, but they're still getting things done there. Like you said, they're that fringe Big Sky team who probably gets a first round if things keep up this way. But they've got some games ahead of them, and I think looking at what's coming up, this Halloween night game in Flagstaff on ESPN2 is probably their toughest game remaining. And, that's no diss to my Weber State Wildcats, but we're just not good right now. So,
no, and I say part of why you guys are probably hearing my tone on NAU is look, I think they're a solid team. And look, if you're Idaho with sitting at 3-5, like obviously on the road against a team that believes if the playoffs, if the playoffs start today, you'd probably say NAU's in.
Yep.
But just with how the Lumberjacks have been the second half of the year, it's hard to know exactly how to feel about them. I say that because in our patreon.com/Tubs of the Club, hashtag only Tubs Discord, which costs us a cup of coffee to support, best place to talk Vandal sports online. There's a lot of different, like, hey, I'm not trying to obsess about like analytic metrics, but like different things like Sagarin, different things like Massey, actually don't have that much of a difference between NAU and Idaho. And a lot of what again, like, looks at football from like a bigger picture lens, things like betting lines, have this as a much closer game than you might expect when you got the number 19 team in the nation, NAU, at home hosting Idaho. And what I think you got to look at is, first off, what does NAU doesn't really have anything offensively. I think they do terribly by any means. They've been slightly underwhelming compared to expectations, but the Lumberjacks absolutely can run the ball. And they have a quarterback who, Pennington said earlier, he can pick teams apart. He can extend plays. And probably the biggest thing is Pennington does not make mistakes. 2 picks on the year, 1 pick in Big Sky play. As a starter last year, only threw 2 picks on the season. That's just kind of what he is as a quarterback. Other name to pay attention to offensively, the receiver who's most likely to be targeted and cause damage is easily Colby Peterson. Has 38 catches, which is 18 more than the next closest Lumberjack. Has 5 touchdowns. Again, it's not really close who Ty Pennington's looking to. Yeah, I mean, Katzis has almost double the number of receiving yards as the number 2 threat, Isaiah Eastman. We're looking at 599 to 333. So the single receiver most likely to be relied on to bust open a play or to capitalize on a scoring drive is going to be Colby Katzis. But it's the reason I'm talking so tepidly about NAU is just they're kind of fine everywhere. Do they have anything that like jumps out at you as horrifying? No. Do the Lumberjacks have any weakness that you would say is completely catastrophic? Not really. However, last week against the Bengals, NAU picked up their first, I mean, and when I say first, I mean the number 1 stop in the red zone. So the
bad red zone defense. Yeah,
I certainly would say part of why the tone on NAU for me, and also I think just nationally, why the reaction to NAU is they're solid, but not a murder. No one is confusing NAU as a team who is likely going to skip the first round of the playoffs. No one is confusing NAU right now for a team that's ceiling is beyond round 2 of the playoffs. Part of that reason is because
depending on matchup, right?
Yeah, of course.
Very
Matchup dependent, as always, is that the Lumberjacks defensively, the Lumberjacks are very much kind of okay. They're just kind of okay. That's pretty much it. Their scoring margin in conference is underwater by 4.5 points. That's because they got their asses kicked against Montana State and Davis. But both Montana State and Davis were able to do whatever the hell they wanted against NAU. The thing you might look at that might be troubling for Idaho is Idaho defensively, your weakness is most certainly the secondary. And against a school like Idaho State, I mean, the Bengals were not really able to get NAU off the field.
Yeah, I mean, and like going back to the red zone defense thing, it seems like if a team can move the ball, then like the momentum is such that it doesn't get stopped, right? Like they're at that point, fine. Looking at some of their conversion numbers, one thing that kind of jumped out to me is that they are dead last in the conference at 4th down conversion. 4th down, obviously not a situation that comes up a lot, but 9th in the conference when it comes to 3rd down conversion. So they have a hard time getting off the field. And so if you're a team that can just sort of like beat them at their own game, because like you said, Pennington is going to kind of play that almost like Miles Hastings style game where he wants to dink and dunk you to death, hit the flat, just get enough yards to move the chains. If Idaho does that to NAU, they're going to have probably a decent day because they're just the Lumberjacks have a hard time getting off the field. And especially when the pressure's on, like in the red zone, they really fall apart. So it's like if you can get to that point, you're probably going the rest of the way.
Yeah, and relative strength, you'd say, for NAU is much stronger defensively on the ground than through the air. Yeah, through 4 Big Sky games, they're sitting at the number 10 pass defense overall. Defensive efficiency against the pass, they're sitting at number 11. They've given up 9 touchdowns in four games. So, there is a clear vulnerability defensively for NAU. The clear strength I'd go that I think you're looking at with NAU is the linebacking core. Specifically looking at guys like Travis Arena leads the team in total tackles at 57. And then you look at guys like Ramir Davis. You watch NAU, you're going to hear his name called. Davis with 8 quarterback hurries on the season is that he's one of the best guys to actually get into the quarterback for the Lumberjacks. Ramir Davis also with 4.5 sacks this season.
Yeah, another name to maybe watch for on Friday night is Brandon Wong. Wong has been, right now he's number 2 in the conference. So like you said, Brian, through 4 Big Sky games thus far, he's number 2 in the conference in TFLs. So he's a guy who is doing his job, getting stops, getting behind the line of scrimmage anyway. So crashing through, hitting those holes. But then, like you said, when it comes to sacks, it's a couple of other guys that are maybe starring for them. But just another name to watch out for, Brandon Wong. The linebacking core, though, definitely seems to be a strength for this NAU team. And so something to watch if you're trying to get cute.
Well, you're looking at all 3 linebackers. Each of them has, and talking about Arena, Davis, and Wong, each of them have 6 or 6.5 TFLs on the season. So, easily that's the unit that I think NAU probably is going to rely upon the most. In some ways, it mirrors Idaho, a different type of production in that the relative weakness is going to be the secondary. But NAU sitting at 5-3 for a reason, and they're only, to be fair to the Lumberjacks, who I just cannot describe as anything other than very okay. NAU doesn't possess what I'd call a single bad loss on the season. Their 3 losses are Arizona State, Montana State, and UC Davis. Now, NAU came close, early in the out of conference. They somehow allowed Utah Tech to score 31 points, which I guess that's the other thing I'm just going to always go back to about. I have no idea how a team can possibly be strong defensively if they allow Utah Tech to score 31, because having seen Utah Tech as a Vandal, I don't know their route to 31. So phase 1, how you'll look at a resume, Colby, for a team, because you cover the entire conference, and you can always point to one game rightly or wrongly that in your mind is like, that's who these guys are. For me with NAU, that's allowing Utah Tech to score 31 and then allowing Southern Utah 49 the week after that.
Yeah, and getting lucky and pulling that game out, at the very end. But like you said, 49, and it was a dogfight in Cedar City.
Yeah. So now before we shift to the Idaho end, I do just want to put this I want to maybe frame NAU different because they have 5 wins. And I know I don't sound ecstatic about them, but NAU is certainly better than multiple teams who have beat Idaho this year. You certainly would pick NAU over Eastern in a head-to-head matchup. You'd certainly pick NAU over Northern Colorado in a head-to-head matchup. So what is it about Northern Arizona that makes them number 19 in the nation? I know we covered a couple of the things, but NAU is one. They do not beat themselves offensively. This team does not turn the ball over, and they absolutely have steady to solid production pretty much across the board. Their line has given up more than a few sacks. However, that's a little bit less of an issue with a team like Idaho doesn't get to the quarterback. But whether you're talking about receiver or you're talking about having solid running backs or a quarterback who, does he look like a first-team All-Big Sky player this year? No. But is he solid? Does he absolutely make the plays he needs to? And does he not beat himself? Yeah, those things all describe Ty Pennington. That's kind of what I believe your NAU team is really hanging their hat on. And then just looking at talent in general, they're not the same class as Davis or Montana State, but when they've played your lower-ish teams, NAU was in control against Idaho State for pretty much 75% of that game. Idaho State, look, they're sitting at 1 D1 win, but right now, if gun to my head, if I was told to pick Idaho State last week of the season, I wouldn't call that like an 80-20 proposition Idaho by any means. So NAU, across the board, when they've played teams that are mid Big Sky to lower level in the FCS, they clearly are the more talent. They've clearly been fine talent-wise, and they absolutely put points on the board.
Yeah, I think that, like, if we were to say that there's a Big Sky pecking order, right? The Montana schools are going to be 1 and 2, followed by maybe Davis. I'm not sold on SAC. They've been a little too up and down. So I think that SAC and maybe NAU are in that fight for that 4-5 spot in the conference, right? Because I agree with you. Eastern, I mean, that's a team I saw last week, and they barely survived a Weber State team that just for some reason gifted them 9 points, and that's the difference in the game. Not sold on them. Northern Colorado been a little better defensively, especially. They've drawn teams into these like dogfights. Obviously, you guys know, you saw them a couple of weeks ago. But yeah, I'd say that they're about that like 4 or 5 in the conference. And if you're the 4th or 5th best team in the Big Sky Conference, like you said, that's usually a pretty good spot that you want to be in, considering the strength of the conference. Even though I feel, I mean, you guys can disagree, but I feel like this is a down year for the Big Sky. Maybe we don't see as many. The top isn't as heavy as it is in other years. So overall, very, very good. They're above average at some things, below average at some things, but nothing really jumps off the paper as like, yo, this is the thing that they do.
Yeah. Just last point I want to add, Captain 58 saying, is NAU just a perpetual Big Sky Mendoza line? Feels like every year if you're better than NAU, you make the playoffs. And if you aren't, well, your team sucks. That kind of dovetails with what you're saying about the conference as a whole, in that there's a kind of a canyon once you look, I think there's a big gulf between Montana State, and then Davis. But if you're going to batch those 3 teams together, it feels like there's an ocean between number 3 UC Davis and then 4 NAU, 5, 6, 7, 8, whoever you sort out of those teams, depending on the week, depending on injury. You talked about Northern Colorado, and I guess they're kind of an inverse team with UNC, because Northern Colorado's played teams very well through the air, like defensively. A lot of quarterbacks have a tough time against Northern Colorado. That has not been the case against NAU. NAU, you look at the per season in conference play on the ground. NAU hasn't given up a ton of rushing yards on the Big Sky season, but teams don't actually run that much against NAU comparatively, because NAU is clearly vulnerable in the secondary. So I guess that we're going to shift here. We need to talk the keys to the game for Idaho. Before we get there, Marten, got to remind everyone, check out vandalgear.com. Now that we do not have home field, Colby, to buy our Vandal gear from, this is the new place. Jeff from Pacific Custom Sportswear set up vandalgear.com. It is the best place online to find your University of Idaho gear. And it is the most of the designs here you really can't get anywhere else. And look, the pricing is better than whether you go to the bookstore or some of those other websites. And the quality is absolutely not a step down whatsoever. I own the Fighting Tater shirt. It's one of the most comfortable, durable shirts that I have. So if you want Vandal stuff, get a hold of Jeff at vandalgear.com. Or if you see this, you're like, hey, I like these designs. My business, my org, my school, we're doing a fundraiser. We want to have gear. Jeff can do that for you. He can use your own logo. He can help you design a logo. You can do it on sweatshirts, t-shirts, hoodies, whatever you want. So the company's Pacific Custom Sportswear. Get a hold of Jeff at vandalgear.com. All right, Colby, you're not a Vandal, but we kind of call you Vandal adjacent. Because of the walk-on shirts, for sure. But 2, you're down here from Weber State. We got to make sure we have our focus, somewhere. So you're like, we talked off camera to get you a little bit caught up. We know Joshua Wood's back. We know he's wearing a brace on that left knee, but against Portland State, Joshua Wood absolutely looked fine. But Idaho needs to come out with a win for sure. Like, we're on this show, we do not really care about talking playoffs for Idaho until the Vandals string a few wins together consecutively. And a win against Portland State is cool, but everyone beats Portland State. Yeah. If Idaho's going to pick up a win in Flagstaff, tell me where that starts for you.
Well, like you said, we've talked already about it. Like, the Pennington is kind of the crux of their offense, and their offense has been okay. It's been good. Like I said, no more than 31 points so far in Big Sky play. But and so this is where I think maybe it's an opportunity for Idaho to step up, because the pass rush for the Vandals has not been incredible. It's been just okay. And so I think that Pennington is pressurable. I mean, usually with a quarterback like this, I mean, what is he like? He's like a junior now or something. He's getting to that point where he has enough experience that the pressure maybe doesn't get to him as much. But in this case, I think that he's still gettable, because you see some of those things. Like you said, he doesn't make a lot of mistakes, only 2 picks on the year. But I think that he can be got, because when we look at sacks against within the conference, like NAU is the bottom third, they're 10th in the conference. So he can be sacked. And if he's on his back, then he's not throwing the ball, and that's the offense that they want to run, right? They do rush the ball a little bit, like you said. They're not terrible. They're 4th in the conference in just Big Sky play, but they definitely want to pass the ball. That's the strength. That's what they like to do. So I think that if you're going to disrupt what they like to do, get him on his back, put some pressure on him, even though it hasn't necessarily been a strength for the Vandals thus far this season. And then on the reverse, you've already talked about it. Wood is back, and there is that brace on the knee, so maybe the mobility is not necessarily there, but still a good passer. And we've already talked about how the NAU secondary is not the same as it was last year, where they were really good. The secondary this year is now maybe some of a liability for them. So if you're going to score points, that's probably a good place to start. You talked about Eli Cummings off camera before we started being back and being healthy. So that'll help to kind of keep the defense honest, especially with the linebackers that we talked about. You want to keep them occupied. But if you're going to take the top off, this seems like the team to try and do it.
Yeah, so I'm going to start with the defensive part that you brought up, because part of what Pennington does is one of the things that Idaho's defense is absolutely susceptible to, which is quarterbacks who are accurate, who are content to pick apart gaps. They have found success against Idaho. I mean, you look at the San Jose State game as one example. And we've also seen through defensive coordinator Court Dennison has given absolutely like a lot of different looks on the season. And I feel that every Vandal comes away feeling the same thing. If Idaho needs to not go with that 3-man rush, because it gives every quarterback a notion of time. And Ty Pennington will be able to sit back and have no trouble finding gaps eventually in the Idaho secondary, because if they're not there right away, Pennington can extend plays with his legs. So like phase one, like you said, the pass rush, it's not going to get to Pennington all the time, because Idaho's just not a strength there. The bigger deal for Idaho is, can you get enough stops? If Idaho cannot get to Pennington, it's going to be very tough to get enough stops, because Idaho sometimes looks worse on 3rd and 10 than they do on 3rd and 4. Like weirdly, that we've seen that through a few games, but Idaho's got to get enough pressure on Pennington to make those 3rd downs tougher to convert. And the other thing from the Idaho end, which I really hope NAU is not listening to this, NAU has rushed it about 30 more times on the season than they passed it. That is exactly what Idaho wants. We want teams that are going to run a little bit more, because in spite of not having a great pass rush, Idaho on the season has absolutely had more than a few games where they look like, so long as the tackling is on point, Idaho can stop teams on the ground. They just have to get enough offensive support so they're not trying to do it the entire day. I'm going to point to the Montana game, where for more than a half, Eli Gilman was absolutely held in check. Now, things changed eventually, but that's just, that's one point of evidence on the season. If you watch Idaho, it's hard to miss that the Vandals are fine. Against run-heavy teams, Idaho feels completely okay. Where things get tough is when you got quarterbacks who are picking them apart, or Northern Colorado just took Idaho deep too often. NAU doesn't necessarily try to take the top off you completely, and not saying they can't. Katz is a good receiver. Pennington can throw. Yes. But Pennington being comfortable picking teams apart, that's the part of NAU that is scariest to me as a Vandal. The way to deal with that is we got to get to him enough to hope he makes some mistakes. And 2, you have to be tough against the run, because NAU wants to run it right around as much as they pass it, or teeny bit more. And we just got to give Pennington as many 3rd and 8s as we can. On the offensive side of the ball, Colby, if you're not watching every Vandal game, you're going to miss a little bit of this. But post Eastern Washington, which was the game before Joshua Wood came back, head coach Thomas Ford was open about saying, "Hey, play calling offensively needs to change." In subsequent press conferences, he said he took a greater role in the offense in the week heading into Portland State. And yes, playing Portland State fixes a ton of things, but the way Idaho went about scoring their 45 points against Portland State did not match the offensive strategy from much of the earlier season. I say that because the rushing passing was closer to 50-50-ish. However, Joshua Wood was essentially a non-factor after the second quarter. If you look at about the halfway point, Idaho was more aggressive through the air against Portland State than they had been against pretty much any team on this season, and it wasn't just going deep. There are a few deep strikes, which Wood is getting closer to connecting, but still he just hasn't hit any of those deep shots to the sideline. But there were more quick passes, more intermediate passes, and of course, when Wood extends plays, he's pretty damn accurate. But that's a long way of saying, against Portland State, it looks like Idaho definitively decided that the keys to this team scoring points is not ball control, hold on to it for 40 minutes-ish to keep the defense off the field. It was more, hey, Joshua Wood's the best player on this team, and let's have play calling kind of be focused around that. And I think that is NAU's a great matchup, assuming that paradigm persists, because as we talked about, NAU secondary is imminently vulnerable. Joshua Wood does not throw a ton of picks. He's thrown one pick on the year. He has 2 turnovers on the year. And NAU, they have a couple. They have a corner and a safety each who have 2 picks. So it's not like NAU can't cause problems. But NAU is absolutely a team that Joshua Wood should be able to have success with. And if we have play calling similar to what we saw against Portland State, I think that's the direction Idaho needs, because Idaho's not going to be able to make this a 2016 game. I think the winner of this game, in spite of NAU averaging about 24.5 in Big Sky play, I think you're going to have to score more than 30 to win this game.
Yeah, and I guess I think, credit to Coach Ford and looking at that and saying we're going to change things up midseason. Right? We're not going to just stick with it and eventually it's going to work. We're going to make some changes, and like you said, now that Joshua Wood is back, we're going to play to his strengths, which is a great thing to do, especially where at this point in the season, if you're not at a certain point, your chances of making the playoffs probably aren't great. But I would also say that it would probably be really, really smart and important for the Idaho coaching staff to go back and look at last week's game, because Idaho State is a team that likes to throw the ball, and they throw the ball a lot. But they were only able to put up 18 points. So what was it that NAU was doing that it would seem on paper like they should this is a strength versus weakness matchup, and this should be like they should just be slanging it everywhere, and it should be burning NAU based on what we're seeing. But that wasn't the case. For some reason, Cook wasn't getting necessarily everything they wanted. And so I would say, if you're Idaho and you're looking for offensive opportunities, go back and look at what they were doing against ISU and how to neutralize that, because that's going to be the key to getting what you want, because they have a passing offense in Pocatello, and it was pretty much stifled on Saturday.
It was, but what the Bengals would tell you is that first red zone stop of the season for NAU did not earn that. The wide receiver dropped. He's at the 1 yard line. He tried to extend forward and break the play in the end zone. Yeah. He lost the ball extending forward. It was not like an NAU player. But to buttress your point, that was one play, and Idaho State was shut out in the third quarter. There was a pretty long drought between Idaho State scoring in the fourth and any sort of progress there. So that worthwhile point when we're talking about relative strength, relative weakness of each team. What I think the other reason why I talked about Idaho needing, to me, I think they need to be willing to be a 50-50-ish pass rush, which is a shift from how it had been earlier in the season, Colby, or maybe even 55-45 pass rush is Idaho gets production from on the ground from Joshua Wood. And hey, they throw in Rocco Koch too as the running quarterback. They get production there as well. Eli Cummings had a big game against Portland State, but prior to the Portland State game, now we know Cummings had not been 100% healthy, and according to Coach Ford, he is healthy now. But I feel that Idaho's ground game is unlocked by teams being concerned about the pass first. And we saw that against Portland State. We saw that for stretches of the San Jose State game as well. We had a little bit of some things kind of changed up post San Jose State because we're talking about Montana, which is a different beast, and then no Joshua Wood for back-to-back weeks. But the comment section, we got Crewhead76 saying Dennison 4 down linemen, please, 100%. And I also just want to co-sign that with. And please just play with 3 linebackers. That's one of the things Ford has talked about in multiple press conferences, defensively and offensively, is making things simple, get back, just focus on doing what Idaho players do well, and don't worry about adding other things. Idaho's going to win or lose but based off how well they perform at what they're good at. And the defensive strength for Idaho, for sure, to me, is the linebacking room. Talking Dylan Lane, Isaiah King, for sure. And then Will Cornelson and Cruz Hepburn is listed as a starter, but Cornelson and Hepburn, when Cornelson's playing, those two do split a decent amount of your snaps. Otherwise, thing to look at in the 2 deep for Idaho, Ryan Jesiaro is back, top receiving target this season.
Target.
However, the starting receivers are minus Jesiaro are now completely different than what you would have seen earlier in the season. Part of that's injury. Tony Harsty's been out for a while. The other is Marquand McCraney has emerged these last couple of games as potentially the best deep target for Idaho, or let's say the most explosive target for Idaho. And I mean, we need to see it again, but freshman Nolan McWilliams has claimed the third starting spot as well. He had 3 catches last week against Portland State for 50 yards. I could have sworn it was more than that. But the receiving room for Idaho is is different than what you would have thought, at the start of the season. It's also very young. McCraney's a redshirt freshman, Jesiaro is a redshirt freshman, and Nolan McWilliams is a true freshman. I don't know how many teams are relying on three freshmen right across the board in the receiving room. But those 3 guys, to me, through the season, they have clearly looked at this point of the season as, Ford for a long time during the season talked about how Idaho in the receiving room had a lot of guys who look solid, known who's really taken over as a number 1 type of target. I think that group of 3 is probably your most explosive on the offensive side of the ball. Last thing I want to bring up before we shift to talking a little more of the Big Sky is defensively, Idaho just has to have a good game in the secondary. That's the obvious relative weakness for Idaho. It's going to be a tougher matchup to me because, look, you look at the Northern Colorado game and you just say, look, that was Northern Colorado has good receivers. The quarterback was getting the ball out real fast.
Yeah,
the Vandals,
arm, cheeks,
honestly,
good. Right.
But Idaho that game felt like they were just not ready. They weren't going to. NAU to me is different in that, can they beat you deep? Yes, but they're the type of team that because they can pick you apart, that can be demoralizing to watch as third down after third down is converted. Idaho's not going to shut down NAU. There's absolutely no prayer. But the Vandals have to find a way to get enough stops, assuming they're getting reasonable support offensively to keep this game close. I don't think NAU is a team Idaho could blow out. I do think this is a team that Idaho can 100% compete with. It's going to be very important for the starting corners, Jamel Blenman and Caleb Ricks. They're just going to have to look. Caleb Ricks is is easily the best corner on Idaho, freshman Colby. Jamel Blenman's been on Idaho. He's a senior. This is his first year as a starter. He's been up and down. He has a couple picks. He's absolutely had his moments against Portland State and against Eastern. He had a few big plays, actually big pass breakups against Eastern. That's part of why the game stayed close. But he's also had his moments when he's been picked on this year. So in particular, if I'm talking about a guy on the secondary who can make a difference, having a game from Deuce Blenman, that looks closer to these last 2 games against Eastern and Portland State than previous games against, let's say, Northern Colorado, I think that's going to be key for the Vandals.
And I think back to what you were talking about earlier about simplifying things. I guess this is sort of the risk of having a defensive coordinator or a coordinator in general that has that NFL experience. Is it can get very complicated. They have that level of football knowledge, right? But maybe giving NAU a different look than they've seen so far on film. Maybe going to a 4-3 base makes that difference, like you said, to put that pressure on Pennington and limit his time in the pocket because he is an accurate passer. But then I also wanted to talk about the wide receivers because when I chatted with you guys before the season started, Marquand McCraney was a name that came up as somebody that they would hoped would take the next step. And early in the season, injury, I think, kind of kept him limited. But now you're starting to see it. And it also helps that what is a really accurate and a good passer, so it helps to make their jobs easier. So McCraney coming out and starting to be that target, I think it only bodes well because I think that this year the portal's maybe going to calm down a little bit. I think last year was kind of crazy and that guys sort of learned from that, and you probably won't see people as gung-ho about hitting the portal as they were last year. So there's a good chance that those guys aren't young, so they're not going to take that experience and try and ply their trade somewhere else, that they're going to be willing to stay and continue to grow in Moscow.
I guess other thing I want to bring up, I think third down conversions are going to be huge this game. And that defensively is something Idaho has a significant advantage over NAU on the season. Now, of course, part of that's because you look at the UNC game, the third down conversions are irrelevant when guys are throwing, 40-yard touchdown passes. But on the Big Sky season, Idaho's been pretty damn good on third down. The problem has been giving enough offensive support to getting teams off the field. The Vandals they hold teams to just under 31% conversion on third down. NAU, on the other hand, pretty bad at getting teams off the field. They're the fourth worst in the conference at just under 47%. That is right around the level Portland State is at getting teams off the field. So it's going to be big for Idaho to be able to force NAU into third and long and make that matter. And simultaneously, the Vandals have to be able to punish NAU secondary in not being able to get teams off the field. And we have some in the comments section. A couple things. We have Tom Kendall saying Idaho owning time of possession would be nice. Tom, I don't disagree with you, but I have evolved to the point where what I care about I haven't evolved. I've been here the whole year. I care about points. There are times earlier in the year where it sometimes felt like the play calling for a lot of the game was meant to control time of possession and not necessarily to score points. That's why I always had that PTSD about Idaho sprinting to third down for a lot of the season. We absolutely did not see that against Portland State. So am I cool with time of possession? Yes. What am I more cool with? Points. Sam Dane 4073 saying Idaho should be feeling frisky off their win. I'd say they have a puncher's chance. We're going to get to that. But I mean, tonally, I don't think you can listen to us both talk and believe that either of us expect a blowout at this point. Colby, not trying to steal your prediction. Crewhead 76 gives safety help on their best receiver. Absolutely. And then the stats department, NAU leads time of possession in conference at 33, just under 34 minutes. Idaho's at just under 30 minutes on the game. So, I mean, look, NAU does a lot of what Idaho wanted, looked like they wanted to earlier in the season. And I'm not saying time of possession is irrelevant for Idaho, but I feel that if you're leaning into Joshua Wood as like the key to your offense, I just think you're more concerned about getting points on the board. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to sprint to him. Joshua Wood playing well is going to give you the ball for a while. Before we pick the Big Sky, and Colby, in case you forgot, I forgive you. We picked the Idaho game last. Yep. Something everyone should be aware of is Snake River Stampede Canadian whiskey. Look, it's the best Canadian whiskey you're going to find in the state of Idaho. They got two options, your entry-level Stampede or your small batch 1915. Your entry-level Stampede at $26 a bottle, one of the best buys in the entire state. And legitimately, this is, to me, if it's not the best, it's the second best Canadian whiskey you can get in the state. Double barrel finish, starts in first fill bourbon, finishes in Oloroso sherry casks. Now, if you want to celebrate a big win, which I would, if Idaho picks up a win here, I'm celebrating that. I'd reach for your small batch 1915. It's aged an additional 2 years. It's still that same 80% corn, 10% rye, 10% Marley, malted barley blend that the Stampede has, but different finishing plus an extra 2 years gives it just a little bit more. It doesn't really matter which of these bottles you buy. They're both, again, top two Canadian whiskeys in the state of Idaho, and they're great buys anyway. Grab yourself a Snake River. Marten, are you going to show yourself, Marten? You going to show that? Okay, for watchers, now you can see Marten. Nick Davis made us those tubs at the Club Lights, which I still got to get my logistics to get mine in here, but okay, we need to pick the Big Sky. And Marten, full disclosure, producing in public. I may have failed to open my Big Sky schedule.
So does that mean I get to pick the games we're picking each week now? Oh, hell yeah.
Okay, I got it up. All right, so we'll go Marten, Colby, and then I'll add in. First game we're going to look at is Montana at Northern Colorado.
Montana State.
Montana State. Thank you. Good God. Montana State and Northern Colorado.
I'm going to go Montana State. I don't think this will be close.
Okay, so I think Montana State is a juggernaut. And I've said it on my show, said on the Sunday show, which I haven't got to record for a minute. We'll get there someday. In Big Sky play, Montana State is allowing 11 points a game. Like, no one is doing anything against the Bobcats offensively, but then the Bobcats and conference players scoring over 40 points a game. So, like, this is just, it's honestly, it's a different version of last season where what did Montana State do well? Everything. And you know what? The Northern Colorado, they're stronger against the pass than they are on the ground. I think Montana State's going to have no problem running all over the Bears. So I'm going to go Montana State. Next game. Now this is the one near and dear.
Colby, did you pick the game? Or?
But I was going to say, Northern Colorado, if they were going to be something last week, they were going to have to beat Davis, and they didn't do that, right? So now that puts them low. I mean, they're at home again, but I don't think it matters against a team like it's very much looking like Brawl. Cat Grizz is going to decide the conference champion this year, and so I'm with you guys. I'm going to take the Bobcats in this one just because they can run, and that can be a problem.
Actually, before we go to the other games, I do, just because you're here, where do you throw Northern Colorado, Colby, in that middle of the Big Sky hierarchy?
Yeah, it's tough, right? Because so you were just talking about time of possession and how that's not everything it's cracked up to be, right? Because I look at our game against Eastern Washington last weekend, and we outplayed Eastern Washington in nearly every phase of the game except for the one that mattered, points. We lose by 3. And so I agree with you that, like, sometimes controlling the clock isn't necessarily the thing that it needs to be because you got to put points on the board if you want to win. I think that for Northern Colorado, they're obviously definitely improved, right? Because consistently we had them in power rankings at the bottom of the Big Sky. Lamb still hadn't figured it out. But this year the defense is looking a lot better. They want to get teams in one of these, like, grind it out, back and forth, just one of those classic ugly Big Sky defensive matchups, right? That's who they want to be now. And so I think that they're probably a better team than Eastern. Their defense is better, I think. And I think that Gibson is probably a better traditional quarterback than Bell is. But Bell's probably a better rusher, too. So he's more of a dual threat. But, I mean, it's weird to say that Northern Colorado is a mid-table Big Sky team now after years of being in the basement.
Yeah, the conference itself, if minus, wild to think that Eastern Washington is 3-1 in conference play, because I don't buy them.
They should be 2-2. I'm gonna be biased here. That game, there were a lot of very questionable calls. Dude literally caught a pass on the ground, used the ground to catch, and they said, yeah, touchdown. They reviewed it and still said touchdown. We lose by 3. There's just lots of little things like that where I'm like, all right, whatever. They should be 2-2 anyway.
Well, they got Idaho on the worst week of the season. However, I've said on the show, I think Idaho looking as bad as they did, those back-to-back Northern Colorado Eastern weeks, I actually think long-term that is going to be good for the program as far as, like, being confronted with things having to change. But if Joshua Wood plays against Eastern, there's no way Idaho loses that game, but he didn't. So the Eastern sits at 3-1. I'm still good. I think they're 3-1 frauds, but whatever.
They are 3-1 frauds.
moving on from talking about Eastern, Montana, Weber State.
Yeah, I mean, Marten, you want to go first on this one?
Yeah, I think we all know where I'm going to go with this one. I'm just going to go Weber State and let you two talk about why I am the dumbest fucker to pick Weber State ever.
Well, it's not crazy, right? Because Weber State goes, in a year where we were awful. Weber State goes to Missoula last year and wins. It's a high scoring game. It's a quarterback shootout, and Weber State gets it done in overtime. Wins in Missoula for the first time since like '08 or something like that. Like, it had been a long time. So is it possible? Yeah, because the thing that got Montana in that game was that he really wanted to play man defense. That's what he wanted to do, and he got burned over and over again, and he wouldn't change. So do I believe he'll make the same mistake with a lesser quarterback on Saturday? Maybe, but it's a lesser quarterback. Dijon Jennings is not Richie Munoz. So I've got to I'll be there. I'll be in the building. I'll be out there tailgating as well, but I think the Grizz got this one because, like I said, everything is leading up to Cat Grizz deciding the conference champion.
I think this is not going to be close. I think Weber Weber has thrown 12 picks on this season, and that's between Jackson Gilkey is out. He's been out for a while.
Yep.
Yeah, quarterback is you said Dijon Jennings.
Yeah, Jennings, not a great passer. Had some picks last weekend that were like, there was one that wasn't his fault, but there was definitely the one that basically ended the game. That was on him.
Yeah, I don't see what way Weber State exploits Montana, and Montana, they're averaging 40 plus on the season. They're just like the Bobcats.
It's looking really good, right?
They're running through teams. Like now, the Montana games, they always flow a little bit different than Montana State because it's like the Grizz can be like a little bit up and down within the scope of the game. Like for example, being down like 9-0 against Cal Poly at halftime or whatever it was, or 9-7, whatever. They trailed Cal Poly, then shut out the Mustangs in the second half, win 28-9 convincingly. But that's because that's kind of who Montana is. Houck's really good at getting his teams to seize momentum. Just before they seize momentum, they can look a little shaky for a minute. But this is, like you said, I mean, Montana is a actual top five team, not Portland State top five team.
Yeah, real one. Yeah.
The Big Sky Conference Championship looks like it's going to be played between two undefeated teams. It had Cat Grizz to close the season, and I don't think Weber State's going to change that matchup this week.
No. Another thing to think about, Davion Godley, our RB1, out, busted his knee last weekend, so he's out for the season. Chauncey Sylvester also was out for a time in that game, so the one thing Weber had going for them that they ran the ball well, two of your best running backs are gone. So, yeah, man, it's not looking good for the Cats. Probably Grizz rolling Ogden on Saturday.
Okay, now we have Sac with a silent K against our frauds, Eastern Washington.
I'm gonna go with the frauds, Eastern Washington, only because I think Sac's was also frauds, but yeah, I'm going Eastern. They keep going.
Game is in Cheney.
You know what? You're right. It is in Cheney. I feel like this is kind of an easy one to pick Sacramento State. One, Eastern's pass defense sucks, so they're not going to be able to make Sacramento State look rough through the air. Now, Eastern is stronger defensively on the ground than you might guess, but no one's going to accuse them of being good. Sacramento State has been much stronger when they can run. I don't think they're going to have that tough a time running the ball. And Sac is pretty good at getting to the quarterback against most teams this season. That's the relative strength. I think Nate Bell is going to have he'll certainly bust a run or two here or there, but we already adjudicated this before the game. I think Eastern is like the worst 3-1 team we're ever going to see. Congrats for 3 wins. Like, they did pick up the wins. But sure. No, dude, I think Sacramento State's going to win. I don't think this is going to be – honestly, I don't even think it's going to be that close unless Sacramento State completely face plants. Idaho State at UC Davis.
I'm going to say Sac State as well on that one because the way that Sac State beat Weber, once they figured out that they could just run the quarterback all over us, the game was over, and they ran the score way up on us. And like you said, Eastern, not a great pass defense, so they have the ability to throw, and that's what they're going to want to do, but also not a great rush defense either. Average, slightly below average. It's going to burn them. I don't see the defense stopping this go-go offense, even though it hasn't looked great. I think probably Sac wins this game.
Yeah, I mean, if you look narrowly at conference play, though, Colby, Sac State's scoring 38.5. So like they took a minute to get going, but in conference play, I mean, I would love if Idaho was putting up points like that. All right, we have what would have been the Hawkins Bowl back in the day. Idaho State at UC Davis.
Marten, you want to go first?
I am gonna go with Davis here.
Yeah, I'm probably thinking about Davis too, because even though Davis's pass defense is not incredible, it's actually bottom. It's one of the it's the fourth worst in the conference. I think that NAU kind of gave Davis the blueprint last week on how to slow them down, and Davis has. I don't know if Pinnock is going to be back this week. He was out last week, but if he's back, I think the kid's going to win Freshman of the Year in the conference. He's been really good. And so if he's back, he's going to carve up Idaho State.
Yeah, Jason Mayer in the comment section saying Kitties are starting to fall apart, Davis by a lot. That's the thing I want to point to with Idaho State is, look, Idaho State does have some winnable games to close the season, but for as bad as Vandal fans felt about Idaho for a lot of the season, the Bengals have one D1 win so far. And look, offensively, the issue that you have for Idaho State is they actually can run the ball fine. Like Deshaun Brooks is actually one of the more talented running backs in the conference. But for the Bengals, if they don't score with some big plays, they haven't really persistently been able to have longer drives. Yeah. They need big plays, whether on the ground or through the air. And look, Jordan Cook can make all the throws.
Yeah, he can slang it, man.
Yeah, no, he probably has the most arm talent in the Big Sky. But honestly, the Bengals just haven't really been as commanding offensively as I think a lot of us believed they were going to be this season. And my basic point of evidence here is in Big Sky play, they're scoring 24 a game. That's a very ordinary-ish number. And Idaho State's just not fantastic defensively. That's it. So this game, for sure, I'm going to go UC Davis. I do think the Bengals, look, they get their reprieve when they close with Cal Poly, Weber, and depending on how you feel, Idaho. However, that Cal Poly game is looking a lot tougher than it did, a month ago.
Yeah.
The game we all really wanted to sit and talk about. Top 5 Portland State at Cal Poly.
I'm going Cal Poly. It should not be close.
No. I mean, Portland State has shown that they are awful. They are the worst team in the conference, one of the worst teams in the country this year. So, no, man. It's Cal Poly. And then I think this game is also in SLO, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm taking Poly.
Yeah, I truly believe Bruce Barnum looks like he's trying to get fired at Portland State. I think we talked about it on the post-game show, Marten. Dude looks completely disengaged. However, like this,
checked out. Like I feel like the BSPN group, the chat, could probably do a better job coaching Portland State than Barnum is this past.
He just looks completely uninterested on the sideline. And then the thing I'm always going to go back to that last week is he has a lineman go down and Coach Ford's the guy who checks on the player. Barnum didn't move a muscle. So I don't know. But anyway, Portland State's terrible. They can't run, they can't pass, they can't defend the run, they can't defend the pass. Cal Poly is going to pick up the win. Now the game we've all been waiting for. Your official pick and final word, Marten. Idaho at Northern Arizona this Saturday.
I think I'd have to. I know it's Portland State, but I think Idaho is back on the right track. I'm gonna go Idaho 30, NAU 24.
Okay. I think that because, like you said, that momentum matters, and the two teams are kind of in a different spot right now, right? Like I think, like you talked about earlier in the show, Brian, Idaho fans aren't necessarily expecting the playoffs, so they're sort of playing with house money at this point, right? Wood is back. That's a big deal. And so you're not going to see what you saw, 2 and 3 games ago. You're going to see more of what you saw last weekend, and that matters. So there's not a lot of pressure on Idaho right now. and there's a lot more pressure on NAU because they think they can get back to the playoffs, and they still have an eye toward that. That means that Idaho should come in playing loose, and if they play their style of game with the secondary like we've already talked about, Idaho's got a shot. But I also think that this is probably maybe a higher scoring game. So, Marten, you said 31-24?
30-24.
30-24? Because I was going to go maybe a little bit higher. I wanted to go Idaho's maybe like 34 to NAU's 28.
All right, in the comments section, you guys, by the way, I always suck at this part. Nick Weber, Idaho 42, NAU 28. Tom Kendall, Idaho 35, NAU 34. Jason Mayer, Idaho 35, NAU 31 with Idaho +2 in turnovers. Crewhead 76, Idaho 35-28. I don't know how to read that. Missoula Vandal, something like that. Or is that Missoula Vandal? Whatever. Idaho 35, NAU 20. Whatever your handle is, you know who I'm talking about. Type it in the comments section. I'll read it correctly someday. Captain 58, NAU 45, Idaho 38. Steve Hertz Vandals 45-20. Man, I'd take that if we get that. And then Dallas is not here. To keep things up, Dallas picked Montana State, Montana, sack with a silent K, Davis and Cal Poly, like most of us, other than Marten. Then Dallas picked NAU 37-35. I was right. Hey, I was right. It's Missoula. So it's Missoula Vandal. Thank you. Man, I go back and forth on this because it's hard to want to generalize off a Portland State win because Portland State is atrocious.
Yeah.
Simultaneously, I felt that Idaho stylistically looked a lot better offensively with what they did. And assuming that Denison has figured out how we're going to get at least a little pressure on Pennington, there's some ways where the matchup is a lot more favorable than I think you might think on paper. If you think Ty Pennington is going to be first team all Big Sky, then pick NAU all the way. If you don't, which I don't, I think he's good. I think he's not great. I think he's good, not great.
Pinnock and Ayat are better. Just saying.
Yeah, this is an imminently winnable game for Idaho. So I am going to make what I feel like is the mistake of picking Idaho 35-31. I think it's going to be tight, but I'm ready to, I told everyone at the game, I'm ready to get my heart broken by Idaho again. After just it's not the win against Portland State that I care about. We saw some material changes that if they generalize into these next games, I think that's Idaho and their coaching staff taking a developmental leap. But we're going to see. So, Colby, thanks for joining us this week. Absolutely bailed us out short notice. Tell everyone where they can find you.
Yeah, man. Like Brian said at the top, been doing some writing for FCS Nation Radio, so check that stuff out. Also, there's lots of good content there. Those guys are posting the polls on Monday, and they're posting the podcast on Fridays, so check both of those out. And then you can find me on Twitter at Roy City Slicker. Go Vandals.
Until next time, guys. And remember, hop on the Discord to chat with us this Halloween. Patreon.com/Tubs of the Club. Support the show. Go Vandals.
Go Vandals.
Tom, Colby.
Go Vandals.